Mm, beautiful.
Ooh, I didn't know it sounds like that.
Mm, okay, I'm gonna share my screen with everyone. If I can, yeah. Everyone can see that. That looks good, normal. Thumbs up. My screen looks fine to everyone. Okay, cool. Cool. For any of our attendees hopping on, I just want to say thank you for coming. We're going to give it a few more minutes before we get started with our conversation. Okay, perfect. I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Um, so, for anyone who's tuning in on our Facebook live stream and also today for our attendees, thank you so much for coming. I'm excited to share the conversation that we're going to explore and talk about that's very dear to any of these people who love food who are with us here today. And I just hope that whatever comes out of this conversation is extremely comforting, valuable. And so I'm going to take a little bit of time right now, scroll through, to introduce a little bit about the American Indian Cancer Foundation and what we do here. My name is Catherine Zing. I'm an enrolled member of the Ho-Chunk Nation, and I am on the prevention and policy team here at ACAF. ACAF for short, for American Indian Cancer Foundation. And mainly what we focus on is disease prevention, particularly cancer prevention here in Indian country. So the American Indian Cancer Foundation is a national nonprofit organization established to address tremendous cancer inequities faced by American Indian Alaska Natives. And our main mission here at ACAF is to be able to eliminate the cancer burdens on AIN populations through education and improved access to prevention, detection, treatment, and survivor support. So, the main reason why we're endeavoring on this 4-part series of webinars here at ACAF is June is part of our Celebrate Indigenous Life Month, of where we have the tremendous opportunity and privilege to reach out and, I mean, in a virtual sense right now, hug, uplift, celebrate all of our relatives who have survived the burden of cancer. And we get to just rally behind them and again, just celebrate Indigenous life, especially after a cancer diagnosis. So really quick before I get started, and introduce all the panelists, I really want to be able to talk about just a few different screening options for cancer prevention. A lot of our conversation today is going to be centered on food, which is a great way to prevent cancer, of course, but I do want to just mention and acknowledge any screening like protocols for different age groups. So when we talk about cervical cancer screenings, best practice is going to be screening every 3 years from the age group, and this is primarily in females. From 21 to 29 years of age, you should be screened every 3 years. And then from ages 30 to 65, screening should take place every 3 years with the PAT test, 5 years with HPV testing alone, or 5 years with HPV and PAT testing together. So that is called co-testing. And then again, for females, breast cancer screening should take place 40 to 49 years of age, and 50 to 74 years old should be screened every 2 years. I really struggled to say that. Okay. And for colorectal cancer screening, which was, I think, either this month is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month, or it was the previous month. But really recently, we were talking a lot about this, where screening should begin at 45 and continue through the age of 75. This does not discriminate against male or female. Talking to your healthcare provider is really the biggest step in any of these processes. Your individual screening regimen will depend on your discussion with your healthcare provider. And then moving on to lung cancer screening. This might seem overwhelming in information, but I will have these slides available after the conversation takes place if anyone wants more information. And also this can all be found on our website as well. So just bear with me as I kind of go into a little bit more about lung cancer screening. So people 50 years and older who have a 20 pack per year history, so that is referring to commercial tobacco smoking, and currently smoke or have quit within the past 15 years should be screened. And this is kind of similar to oral cancer screening. There is no screening recommendation. It's important to discuss any risk factors with your dental provider. And some of these risk factors include commercial tobacco use. Oh yeah, it says that in the next sentence. Okay, alcohol use and HPV. And then skin cancer screening. Again, no recommendation. Important to discuss risk factors. And this can include fair complexion, tanning bed exposure, sunburns, etc. HPV vaccination and cancer prevention can be found. So vaccinations are available when you're 9 to 15 years old for children, and recommended to receive a 2-dose series. And then again, when you're age 15 to 26, recommended to receive a 3-dose series. And the last one here, before I get to introduce our lovely panelists. So the hepatitis B vaccination. When you're 18 years of age or younger, it's recommended to receive a 3-dose series, and then 18 years of age or older, talking to your healthcare provider would be the best way to see if this vaccination is right for you. So again, these are kind of really important. I'm gonna stop sharing here. Ooh, me stop sharing here. Okay, thank you for that. So again, these are kind of the heart and the mission behind ACAF is cancer prevention for all of our relatives, and yeah, just encouraging and promoting Indigenous health and thriving in abundance. So a little bit before I have the speakers introduce more about themselves, I have brief bios that I'm trying to find on my mini tabs that I have open about each of, the panelists here with us. And so I will start with Elena Terry, and this is completely random, but we're both Ho-Chunk, so I feel like, yes, we'll start here. Okay, so Lena Terry is the executive chef, founder of Wild Berries, a nonprofit community outreach catering organization. She is also a Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance's contributing mentor for the food and culinary program there. One of her passions has been developing mentorship programs that help build stronger communities within the Indigenous food sovereignty movement while empowering participants to establish healthy relationships. A 2021 Indian Collective Changemaker Fellow, she emphasizes the healing nature of working with Indigenous ingredients. Lena is a proponent for a holistic approach to traditional food systems. And as a seed to table chef, Elena advocates highly for Indigenous and organic growers and producers. She utilizes her partnerships with the Intertribal Agriculture Council, American Indian Foods Program, University of Wisconsin, Rural Urban Flow, several tribal farms, and her own garden projects to provide and preserve ancestral ingredients within her community. In promoting the use of traditional ingredients and methods of cooking, she also partners with ethnobotanists to provide education about wild foods and responsible foraging. Elena started as a traditional and ceremonial cook and is a member of the Ho-Chunk Nation. A trained chef, Elena is also a wild game specialist and a butcher and prefers open fire outdoor cooking. Okay, so of like mighty bio, and I'm really excited to have her introduce herself and tell us a little bit more about her work. And a big thing too is that I asked every chef to either bring an ingredient or talk about an ingredient that they love to cook with. And so, Elena, would you mind sharing a little bit more about your work and what you do and the ingredient that you would love to talk about?
Absolutely. Well, Heini P. Ho-Chunk Rajada, Hahe Maniwenga Hingaide, Nagamaikare Rajada, Elena Teriga Hingaide. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Catherine. I don't know how much more I can say about that. that was everything. No, I am the executive chef and founder of Wild Berries, and I like to start introducing myself with that because it is what I kind of feel like has manifested itself, and I'm lucky and blessed enough to be along for the ride to really say, like, I'm the original Wild Berry. We had started this Indigenous catering to really build community and to offer a bridge and a vessel for people who have suffered a disconnect in the community. And I think at some point all of us have. And really working to build healthy relationships and to overcome that, and to say that, give others space when I know that we felt a lack of that space at times, especially in the culinary field. And as females, I'll say it, being able to really offer our food in a nurturing way and saying that, everybody is welcome and everybody can heal from this. And like I said, I was the first one. And a little selfishly, I'm the one that gets to have contact with everybody. And it's a beautiful thing in building community and relationships, and really using food as this healing vessel in so many different ways. And that's why I have so many different outreaches, because I think you really have to look at Indigenous food holistically. You have to honor that there's foragers and that there's cultivators and then there's hunters, and everybody has this role, but ultimately we are all consumers. So how can we build those bridges and strengthen our network, not just be knowledge keepers, but knowledge sharers and supporters, and really taking the next generation of these incredible Indigenous chefs that feel the connection that we've felt our whole life, and saying, what can I do to get you where I'm at? And then to push you past me so that we can make progress. And I want to see you succeed. And so I've loved having, everybody along this journey, like Crystal. I work with her. I met her originally through the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance, and really being able to say that when we stand in solidarity and we say that this is us and it's not I work, it's not ego driven. It's like, I love seeing the incredible things that are being done in our communities, and what can I do to support? that we can really make great strides forward in reclamation of our food systems. So, I mean, I really feel blessed. And one of the ingredients I was thinking of, and I have, you know, my seeds and my kind of in case of emergency pantry. Like I have everything that I could need in this pantry behind me, but I wanted to share this, and it's choke cherry patties. So I don't get to cook with them as much as I want to because it's kind of like gold, you know. They come only for the small time, and these came from my family in South Dakota. And last year, being COVID, I actually went out there and quarantined with them for a little bit, just so that I could take some time to enjoy, you know, my family. And I'm always on the go, so we went and harvested choke cherries the way that my mom used to with me. And my sister actually gave me my mom's old pounding stone. And we sat, even though we had access to food processors and anything else that would expedite what we were doing with these choke cherries, we sat in the sun and we were able to hand pound them and have these incredible conversations, reminiscing about our parents and the things that they taught us. And in doing so, you know, I ended up with a very limited amount of these incredible choke cherry patties that I used to season wild rice, or that I could make some mojapi from. And really, I think of food as being this incredible vessel that can take us to different spaces and time and with different people. So every time I smell these patties being cooked, it takes me home. And so I wanted to share that with you. I know it doesn't look like much. It looks like a little hamburger, but it's incredible. And for me, it's one of my favorite things. Even just like smelling it right now, I feel like the nourishment that it brings me. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to hear the conversation, to be included with such a wonderful group of people.
Thank you so much, Elena. I love the choke cherry patty, small and mighty, and the vessel of memory, like you were saying, very reminiscent. Okay, our next panelist is Crystal Wapepa. Correct me if I said your last name wrong. I will take it in stride. And a little bit about her. She's an enrolled member of the Kickapoo Nation of Oklahoma. She was born and raised in Oakland, California, and surrounded by a multi-tribal, tight-knit urban Native community. Crystal's objectives for Wapepa's Kitchen are threefold. To acknowledge that we live on stolen land, how that acknowledgement connects to the reclamation of Native foodways and food sovereignty, as well as to educate communities and organizations on the health benefits of Native foodways using the knowledge passed on to her. In addition to Crystal's inimitable experience with food in ancestral and community settings, Crystal has received extensive training from prominent organizations in Oakland and San Francisco on how to run her business. She received the Indigenous Artist Activist Award and has been introduced into the Native American Almanac for being one of the first Native American women to own a catering business. In 2016, she was the first Native American chef to compete in the Food Network show Chopped. Crystal has also been featured in Oakland Side. Crystal has catered and done educational talks in many forums that span local community settings, the tech world, nonprofit orgs, and educational institutions. Crystal has worked with the American Indian Film Festival, Facebook, Twitter, Cal Poly, UCSF, National Indian Health Board. This is a small sample that illustrates the diversity of Crystal's reach. She has traveled all over the country, attending food summits, building networks with other Native American and Indigenous farmers, land stewards, and chefs. So I will hand it over to Crystal to again share a little bit more about herself and to describe and share with us the ingredient that she loves cooking with the most.
Oh, well, thank you for the introduction. I was listening to you, I was like, woo! busy at hard work of doing something that I enjoy. Thank you for that. And thank you who did my bio. but but other than that, I just want to say that thank you for reaching out to me and asking me to participate in this this panel. This is something that is really heartfelt for me, and something that I will always continue to do, as I'll start this off. I lost my sister. We're a year apart. I lost her through cancer. And so when it comes to indigenous foods, of that connection that I do have, it was such an eye opener. This is the reality of me putting myself out there as an indigenous chef and losing somebody and losing family members through this disease. And it's all about, for me, it's about healing in that connection, how I cook, how I harvest, who I meet. Just in simple conversations, just as you know, for one, we just returned back from Alaska, and that was something that was definitely moving and something that I personally needed as an indigenous chef, and all of us together, and how Elena put this group together, and it was something that was meant to be, and that is about our healing. It's about us having that connection. Wherever we go, we're always going to have that connection with food. And for me, our indigenous foods, for instance, it to me it's life. To me, it's something that what we grow, who, like Elena mentioned earlier, you know, our growers, our farmers, our producers. I love those kind of people. And, you know, I see them, I don't see them as, oh, there's somebody that's growing my corn. I see somebody that's growing medicine. That's me. I see someone that's actually helping me connect all these beautiful ingredients so I can feed everybody. And, you know, us as chefs, we're all over the place, definitely. But us as indigenous chefs, this is something that was handed down to all of us, and something that moves us in our hearts, in our minds, in our spirits. And so wherever ingredients that we do get, we know where it comes from. And the best part is we know who it comes from. I love that part. And I just want to say what ingredients that I'm sharing. I don't have it where you guys can't see it physical, but all the ingredients I do have is in my heart, and I'm going to share it with you. I'm currently at a state right now, so I just want to say that I just had a whole bunch of ingredients just now um, in that. And so wherever we go, like I mentioned before, is how we connect, and that's the food is connection, and definitely of this foundation, which I'm a totally that is an eye opener to me and my family, which we support. And this is something that people need to know, how our food is such a connection to our healing, just not in us when we eat something with our palate, but emotionally, mentally, physically, everything. So I'm just going to share just different ingredients that move me. Definitely, if I had to take it way back, definitely it's corn, definitely blue corn, something that I would do with my grandmother, and my grandmother did with her mother, and something that was passed along through me and my siblings. So I'm going to talk a lot about corn.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited to hear about it.
Yes.
And I also love what you said about food as connection and almost like this remembrance. I think I've been sitting a lot with the idea that even if you didn't have access to, say, like traditional knowledges, your ancestors did, and it's still in your memory, it's in your blood, it's in your body, and it's just an act of remembering now. And so I'm excited to hear what you have to say about blue corn. And I'll introduce our next panelist. Her name is Piet de Spain. She is a traveling private chef based in Los Angeles. Piet grew up in the Midwest and belongs to the Prairie Band Potawatomi tribe. Their tribe's reservation is located in Mayetta, Kansas, and she's now dedicating her career to connecting to her native roots, but by learning more about Indigenous cuisine while traveling the world and telling the stories of her culture's traditions and knowledge through food. So I will give it to Piet, and if you would mind sharing us more about your work that you're currently doing, and then also your favorite ingredient to cook with.
Bonjour, Ninikan. Hello, my friends. Hello, I'm Piet. I am currently a private chef in Los Angeles, and I have recently dedicated my career to, as she mentioned, just really connecting to my roots and learning as much as I possibly can about Indigenous food and sharing that with the world, with whoever wants to learn. And I'm very new to this realm of food because I grew up, so I'm Native American and Mexican, so I grew up with both cultures. And so what I'm trying to do with my food as a chef is kind of marry the two and bring both of those cultures together and create what I call Indigenous fusion food. And so the only real way for me to be able to share the knowledge that I learned is by kind of mixing all the things I've learned as a chef, like along the way, which some of it is, I went to culinary school, so I learned, you know, the French techniques and all of the other European ways of food. And that was my introduction to a professional chef career. But I grew up with families that, you know, my grandmother owned restaurants. She's also a baker. So I grew up with her in the kitchen. And I also have two uncles who separately owned restaurants. And so it was like, food was just such like a huge part of my upbringing. And when I got to a certain age where I kind of was like, I can't run from this anymore. It's in my blood. Like, I guess I'm going to be a chef as well. And I didn't want to work in restaurants. So I decided to go to culinary school and figure out what my options were. And the beginning of my career going into, or I guess my schooling going into culinary arts, I was kind of like having like the worst time of my life. I had one of my aunts who I was very, very close with. I grew up with her on the Osage Reservation most of my youth, and she was actually struggling. She unfortunately lost a battle to leukemia the same year that I was studying and going to culinary school, and I was like losing family members to cancer, and I was trying to go to school, and like all these crazy things were happening in my life. And so I really dug deep into this passion for cooking. And this is kind of where I found myself with this desire to just like bring people together. As you know, Crystal and Elena both mentioned, like food is just a powerful source of like being able to bring people together, you know, sharing stories, sharing emotions, and just having like just an amazing time together. And that's just how I grew up, is just have a big family, everybody comes together. If you are old enough to peel a potato, better believe you're peeling a potato. You know, like everyone has a part of the meal for the family, because it's so big that someone has to contribute, everyone has to contribute their part. But so actually one of the ingredients that I was also going to talk about along with Crystal was also corn. But maybe my introduction to corn, or the conversation I'm having, is a little different, because corn is a huge staple in both of my cultures, both Native American and Mexican. And I would love to share a little bit more about maybe like the more Mexican side of its significance in Mexican culture, and how obviously how similar it is to like Indigenous of like the Northern American tribes, how much we like respect it and like what it means to us. And so I'm going to talk about corn, and I have like a little mixture of something here that I've created, which is my fusion of mixtures here of ingredients. So that's what I'm going to be talking about.
Thank you, Piet. Your whole family just like completely modeling intergenerational knowledge and teaching, and that's really, really valuable, and I'm really happy to have you here. So then our final panelist, her name is Mariah Johnson. She has worked at NACC. Do you mind telling me what that acronym stands for really quickly?
Yep, it's a Native American Community Clinic in Minneapolis.
Okay, perfect. In Minneapolis since 2015, and is a registered dietitian since 2012, and has a community health manager, and has a background as certified diabetes educator since 2017. Currently, she fills the role of community health manager, including oversight of cancer screening and prevention grant projects. As a part of her role, she also represents NACC as a part of the Indigenous Food Network in the Twin Cities area, whose goal is to increase access to healthy foods, support local Indigenous food economy, and provide education on basic gardening skills. She particularly enjoys working with chronic disease management, including diabetes, and HTN management. And additionally, she is passionate about cooking and getting patients and community members excited about trying new healthy food recipes. So I'll let Mariah tell us a little bit more about herself and her work with NACC, and then also the ingredient that she wants to talk about.
Sure. So I think that sums it up pretty well. So yeah, I have been in Minneapolis since 2013. I'm originally from Montana and Big Sky Country, but I love Minnesota. I love the green. I love the longer growing seasons as opposed to where I grew up. Minneapolis is really great because we have a lot of farmers markets. We have a lot of really accessible, comparatively to other parts of the nation, access to really great produce. And so the ingredient I wanted to highlight is rhubarb. It's rhubarb time of the year. So in the Midwest, we get a lot of that. So yeah, that's it.
All right. So now that everyone knows a little bit more about who's going to be talking today in the conversation, I'll just start asking questions. And I think it might be best if we just go in kind of the same order that I introduced you all in to answer these questions, because I would love to hear all of your perspectives on the following questions. So starting with Elena, tell us a little bit more, like as a practitioner and healer in your community, there's a lot of language already being said about healing. What are you witnessing in the well-being of your community? And how do traditional foods help people either healing from trauma, disease, which doesn't have to be constrained to physical disease, and also encourage resiliency? So kind of the effects of traditional foods in your community right now.
Well, I've seen in the past few years, our traditional foods are almost exclusive for ceremonies. It's not something that a lot of people eat on a daily basis. There's a handful of families that have really committed to eating like that. And you can see a difference in them, myself included. And it was almost like removing the intimidation factor and, making it the accessibility more available for them. A lot of community gardens have started up because we can't just go to the store and buy everything that we need. Like, it has to be mindfully sourced and grown. And I think that in having those practices, in teaching, cultivation or responsible foraging, there's a great deal of healing just in that process, like physically and spiritually. Like, you are out on the earth, reclaiming your space as a steward of the land, and whatever aspect it is that you feel a little bit more connected to, and really contributing to a meal, like you're going out and you're getting something and you're contributing. There's so much more that comes from that, aside from the physical activity and the connection and the responsibility that we feel. Then you're also creating this meal that we do associate with ceremony and with prayer and with this very spiritual aspect, and you can't help but be more mindful with what you consume. So you cherish that a little bit more, and you're a little bit more thoughtful about how much you're eating and to make sure that there's enough. And I feel like when we look at everything holistically, including our role as consumers, that we can really transform the way we think about food and how it really nourishes us, not only our body, but our spirit. And how I think that once you start removing that traumatic effect, I'm a person that was raised on commodities, and it was hard to have enough sometimes, but we always did, and we always knew where to go when we needed more. We could always go to the land, and reinstilling some of those values and not making it a classism issue or a social issue, but saying that we are all going to go do this, or, you know, some people might feel a little bit more connected in other ways. And how can I encourage that in the community? The ripples that you create can turn into gigantic waves of motion where more people respond. And that's where we're at now. Like the community gardens are popping up and people are feeling uh, a responsibility to those plants to care for them. And they're learning how to care for plants, and myself included. You know, you learn how to care for so much more than just that seed or that plant when you practice that way. It really is watering your spirit and nourishing. And I think we kind of talked about it too, Catherine, that nobody's really exempt at this point. You know, everybody has somebody that they've lost to one of these diseases that it's really hard to understand, you know, what the why, and accept it, and really know how deeply that affects everybody, you know. And I think that the more we're able to kind of rely on these things that have nourished us for hundreds of years and gotten us through very difficult times when there was very little, they show up, you know, and then they're there, and you can have these incredible healing meals with each other. I think the more we shift our thought in that way, the more we can all kind of benefit from the healing power of our indigenous foods. And hopefully at one point we'll be able to say that these are, you know, preventative measures, and we have enough to share for everybody to have the benefits of it.
That's really good. That, like, I don't know, it sounded like what you were saying was like a reconciliation taking place almost between the land and the self, and it, I don't know, produces this like spiritual process, this spiritual healing, which is really good. So Crystal, if you want to kind of answer that question as well, of as a healer in your community, what are you witnessing well-being in your community due to traditional foods?
Oh, I'm witnessing, I guess all through the years, I'm really witnessing it now. Especially when I was young, you know, everybody knew I grew up um, in Oakland, California. And we have a community which is called Intertribal Friendship House. And that is somewhere where I would go when I was young, where we didn't have food, where um, our there's known for the Relocation Act. And so where people would come and we would have the stews, we would have the corn soups. And at a very young age, I had put two and two together, um, as for our community, why don't we have these foods? You know, um, I would go to Oklahoma with my grandparents and I would help her harvest, and we would do all these beautiful things with food. And then into the community, we didn't have anything. And at the same time, we would go to the Intertribal Friendship House and they would have, you know, all these different types of foods. But what I'm witnessing now in our community, which has always been there, but sometimes we have to look, and it's pretty much, for me, I live in an urban area, and especially when you're native, I feel that sometimes people see that, oh, we're in an urban area, you know, we have to go back to the res, or we have to go here, we have to go there. Not in that case, especially where I come from. It's all around us. And maybe I want to say in the past, I've been doing this a long time, maybe in the past 15 years, maybe in the past 15 years, I see more and more of our hunters. I see more and more of our farmers and people that want to come help to grow in little gardens around the neighborhood, you know, our people. But now it's coming to the part where I see a lot of people want to grow indigenous ingredients, which I love and which makes my heart happy. And that is a key to our medicines. That's a key to, even if it's the teas, or if it's our squashes, it's still something even in our urban area that it's so vital to our community of healing. We have a lot of different things in the urban area. You're in Minneapolis, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So a lot of that can be missed, but when we have that in our community, and especially we have elders that help us grow, and then we have the youth have, I've been seeing so many beautiful, just so many beautiful people, and that knowledge that we have, just like for me, I have from my grandparents, right? And when I go to Oklahoma, I didn't know I had that until I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Oh, I do. Because I was raised in a city, in an urban city, but then we have a huge beautiful native community that people from all over. At the same time, I have a lot of family that are California natives, and so what I'm noticing now a lot is a lot of more gardens, a lot of more people wanted to cook, like to cook their own meals, of course, and a lot of people just want healing, and they want that connection to our foods at the end of the day, And I'm going to tell a real quick story here, and Elena already heard because she's my sister, but I was volunteering, and I was cooking, and I was making a sweet dry corn soup, and I just did it how my grandmother had taught me and everything. And at the same time, I was struggling as a caterer. I was struggling, went to culinary school. I did all that, but I love feeding my community. I love um, doing things that some people might not know, and that skill set that I have of going to school, and you know, at the end of the day, I was making this soup, and this old man, he came up to me. He was like 85 years old, and this is when I knew I had a calling. And what I mean by that, sometimes the food chooses us instead of us choosing the food. I hope I'm making sense on that part. And so this is where I had, for me, he came up to me, and I believe he was Danae, I believe, and he comes up to me and he goes, I don't know your name, but he held my hand and he says, however you made that soup, it took me back when I was 7 years old. And he started crying. I started crying, and it brought him so many good memories. And then I was like, you know what? This is what I want to do with my life. I want to cook and provide food that's going to heal. Even on those, people think, oh, like medicine? No, not medicine. We're talking that connection, that spiritual medicine. We're talking medicine in our foods, how we prepare it, how our mind is, how our heart is. And right then and there, when he, until this day, he's still around too. Until this day, I can't believe he's still around. I look at him and we smile, and because I took him back from, he's not even from the Bay. He's from I think he was from New Mexico or somewhere. And I took him back when he was a child, because a lot of us have been displaced, or a lot of us moved for different reasons. We don't know. But at the same time, that's the kind of medicine that I like to provide and I like to do. And I still continue to have that mindset and that heart set when I feed my community and when they come up to me. That to me, that's priceless. No money in the amount of world can do offer that kind of healing. So for us, we cook, we're healers in a way of how we cook and we prepare foods, and where we source our foods, how we get our foods. So that's what I've been seeing probably in the past 10 years in our community. And it's getting more and more tighter and tighter, beautiful and beautiful. And so if we just look, it's all there, but we just have to look.
I absolutely am so glad you shared that story. That like almost communication from the food to the person.
Mhm.
Because I mean, I've heard like stories from elders of where they've literally said of how they've heard corn talk to them. And so that just, and it was corn soup too. I'm like, that all adds up. And even today, I was speaking with like, yeah, the group that I was meeting with here in Minneapolis. And we were talking about how we just like urban natives need a support group for
Yeah.
like all the things we go through. and just like the massive loss that's always felt. And if food brought back the person in your story, like, I don't know, brought back that, like, redeem that sense of loss, I guess. So that's really powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And then it's just not him. It's even with the youth, you know, because it's when you're in an urban area, well, mostly any area, especially today's what's going on in today's times, but it's easy to get lost and mixed and, you know, not really having that connection to your culture and to your foods, you know?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I can empathize with that. So to Piet, the same question of, as a practitioner healer in your community, what are you witnessing in terms of well-being within your community and traditional foods?
So I don't know if you can call me a healer yet. I'm on the road, I'm on that journey. I'm kind of healing within myself first. I think that's what it starts with, is like, you know, being able to be healed and full and whole as a person, and then being able to spread that into other people's lives. And I think that's the journey, like, in that, like, that's the chapter that I'm on right now. As a chef, as a woman, as an Indigenous person, as a human being, you know, I have been kind of moved around a lot. And something that I often share with people is, you know, growing up, I never really knew like where I belonged, being, you know, someone that's also Mexican, but not Mexican enough, Native American, but not Native American enough. But I also kind of look white, but I also kind of look like this. And so it's like always just that like tug and pull of like, where do I actually belong? And like, where is my circle? And like, what is what? And as an adult, I have felt a lot of that is carried into my adulthood, and kind of just like, where do I stand as an adult when people are asking me like, oh, like, you know, you grew up here and like your name is this and you look like that and you're Native American. What is this like for you? And so for me, the healing that I'm experiencing in my own life is really just reconnecting to what speaks to me culturally. And that's growing up on the reservation in Osage, you know, with my grandmother and my mom and my aunt, the one unfortunately who passed, you know, like my brothers, and like just that feeling of like there is so much sense of community, and you're submerged into your culture where like every time that there's a holiday, like the chief of the tribe is there like smoking you, blessing you, and that's something that always brings me back to just like feeling at home, and just having like, even though it's not Indigenous food, it's like post-colonization food of like, you know, like meat pies and like the fry bread and all of those things like that. For us, like for me, is like so comforting. But then now I look back at it and I'm just like, that's not even us, you know, that's not our food. That's not like what my ancestors ate on either sides of the spectrum, on my dad's side or my mom's side. So what actually is my culture's food? And I think that there are other people that are kind of battling the same conversation of like, when people are asking them like, oh, what is Native American food like? And I'm like, honestly, like this is what I grew up eating. And I had soups and I had stews, and there was always something else on the table called fry bread. And I know that that's not us. And it's something that, you know, like for me, has been a journey of like trying to figure out exactly like, you know, kind of doing the healing and the reconnecting through food. And, you know, whatever I have learned, I'm trying to do my best to teach people that. And unfortunately enough, I'm in front of people who want to listen. And they're like, you know, I'm cooking for these people who are very wealthy and very well off, have never struggled a day in their lives. And they're looking at me and they're like, what did you grow up eating? And I'm like, do you really want to know? Like, you won't like it, but I'll tell you what it is. And then I get people that are so interested. And I think to me, like, that's a part of the healing, is being able to like share that, and also be a representation of like people that are like me, that are native, but kind of be like, we're trying to figure out what's what, and reconnect to our, you know, our roots and educate ourselves. And I really like, I wholeheartedly, like, I'm so passionate about starting there, and that's where I am, and just being a sponge and absorbing as much information as I possibly can. Like, I will stay home for like, you know, there's times where I didn't leave my home for like 3 days because I'm just like searching the web for recipes and like, how did, you know, what was this Apache stew? Why is this one different than that one? And the way that I see it is like, there's no real recipe. It's the way that families made food was just with what they had, and it was made with love, and it was there to nurture their family members. And so there's really no recipes. It's all about the ingredient. And then there's just such this like harmonious relationship that us Indigenous people have to these ingredients. And that's where the real like healing comes from, is reconnecting with those ingredients and reconnecting with the history of how these ingredients were, like how they were gifted to us from creator. And we have to like respect it. And I have so much respect for like anyone that's like, you know, preserving these seeds and replanting and regenerating the knowledge and passing this along to everyone that wants to learn about it, and people within the Native culture. And so for me, the healing is really like trying to educate myself and heal as a person and become whole, and then educate myself so I can pass that knowledge on to other people. But within my own family, I know, you know, my mother, she struggles with some health conditions, and a part of like my journey as a chef was studying nutrition and wellness, and just really starting with like simple ingredients and trying to use simple ingredients and make it healthy and make it, you know, wholesome meals, and letting them know, like people like my mom or whoever that doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of money to go spend at Whole Foods for ingredients that are organic and like whatever the else bougie stuff is out there on the shelves, you can use really simple ingredients and make healthy meals and nourish yourself. And some people have this idea that like, you know, perfect health is so unattainable, but it is. So that's kind of where I am in my process of healing and trying to help others heal and teach them how to take care of themselves. So yeah.
Your self-awareness, I love it. I think like what you're saying of like healing yourself, yeah, I resonate with that a lot. And I think like even you saying that is giving like people permission to, I don't know, not like have all the knowledge perfectly, or what that even means, just even like permission to reconnect. And that's like really beautiful, so thank you. And Mariah, as a practitioner and healer in your community, what are you witnessing in the well-being of your community, and how do traditional foods contribute to that?
I would echo a lot of what's already been said around an increase in urban gardening, which is really awesome. Our clinic gets to participate and actually plant some plants in a couple spots that are right by our clinic, and we'll bring patients there. We invite staff to come and help tend to it to try to harness some ownership over it. So that's been really exciting. And then the other thing that we've seen a lot of is also an increase in food vendors, whether it's catering or actual physical restaurants and things like that, that are right in the immediate area of where the clinic is, which has been really cool. And I feel like our role as a clinic is to not only invigorate the physical, the mental, and the spiritual well-being, but also the financial well-being of the community. And so I know when it comes to a lot of like the grants that we have within the community health department and things that we're doing at the clinic, if there's anything that's centered around food procurement to carry out any of the programming, whether it be a catering or something like that, we're always writing in for those organizations and purchasing the food from there or getting the catering from there to, like I said, stimulate that local economy with some of those Indigenous chefs and businesses. And I would say the other thing too that's been really fun is that we have our own farmers market, the Four Sisters Farmers Market, which is right down the street. And so we've been, like I said, allocating a lot of the grant dollars towards giving participants that come to our diabetes group, other, preventative health screening things. We'll give them vouchers. So like $25 vouchers. Thanks for coming, taking care of yourself. Now you can go walk, half a block, which is pretty cool, and get some fresh produce from a lot of the vendors are indigenous farms and things like that. So that's been really fun. So yeah, that's some of the stuff that we've been seeing and sort of doing. I feel like a lot of once you provide, sort for the patients and community members a really low cost or free way to try new indigenous ingredients, of course they're going to be likely to do it, because if you've never cooked with something before, or you're kind of afraid of it, it's hard to imagine spending copious amounts of money on it and then it not going the way you think, or maybe you not liking it. So it's a good way to introduce them in a way that's low cost to them, and being cognizant of that. Oftentimes the clinic we serve, folks don't have those means to run experiments in their kitchen and toss it out if it doesn't turn out. So anyway, so that's been fun.
All the urban gardening. I am inspired now to grow my own. Any suggestions on what I should start with first?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I bet you someone like Elena probably has better input for you on that one.
But wait, really quickly, when you brought up the financial insecurity and accessibility, that does bring me to my next kind of question for all of the panelists, and we can reverse the order. So I'll start with you, Mariah. So how do we encourage people to eat healthily when it's difficult to do? So given the context of you can talk about, especially in the pandemic, what you experienced, encouraging healthy eating, and then also just accessibility in general, concerning food deserts. And yeah, and another thing that I had written down that I was interested in exploring was advice on eating to build immunity. So any types of traditional foods that might encourage immunity to disease coming out of a pandemic. And so, yeah, so I kind of the food security or the economic security here. So how do we encourage our people to eat healthily when it is very difficult to do so?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that farmers markets are expensive and hoity-toity, and that is not the case. I oftentimes educate people that when produce is in season, it is at its cheapest. So therefore, the farmers markets, you can get an incredible bang for your buck. So I think that is something, especially this time of the year, to really emphasize. We do a lot of educating folks and letting them know that don't be intimidated. You can get some really great deals. And then if they are shopping at a grocery store, just reminding them if it's in season, it's going to be cheaper and it's going to taste better. So your chances of getting somebody turned on to some sort of fresh produce that otherwise they might not like is going to be at a better chance. Obviously, when it's fresh and in season, it's going to taste better. So then they might find they actually like fresh produce, and then they'll try other ones. And then the other thing too is just kind of meeting them where they're at. I think that's really important too. So oftentimes we have folks coming into the clinic and it's mac and cheese or it's hamburger helper. So it's okay, so you're doing that. That's a reality. That's fine. I get it. Convenience, cost, all of the above. But maybe we can add to it often. So I feel like as a dietitian, a lot of times we talk about, we don't focus on the problem being what the people are eating. It's more of a problem of what you're not eating, which is the fruits and vegetables. So, okay, you're having that, but maybe we can add to it. And if the easiest, cheapest thing that you've got on hand is some frozen broccoli to throw in that, then that's what it's going to be. And if that's the economical way to at least get started on introducing some of those fresh produce, or fresh or frozen, then that's what it is. So I think that's something to be aware of and cognizant of. And like I said, just meet people where they're at, and coming in with it. Okay, if you're eating fast food, maybe have some baby carrots with your burger instead of the fries, and just small steps, things like that, that are attainable. And then who knows, maybe the next step is they're walking to the farmer's market. So anyways, I think that's what I would say about that. Our clinic's a little bit unique with the food desert piece. Yes, we're in an urban environment. Where we are, we actually are pretty lucky. We've got a couple, like that Four Sisters Farmers Market. We've got an Aldi grocery store that's literally right next door. So a lot of like our programming, we give Aldi gift cards to them for participating, so they can go there and get some produce. And Aldi, as one of my favorite grocery stores, I'm not, trying to rep for them or anything like that, but I really do appreciate the fresh produce that they have for the cost, and it's really accessible for folks. So we do try to alleviate the burden for them in that way. If they participate in programming, we often are giving them all the gift cards for coming for various things, to help out with that. So that's always kind of fun, brainstorming ways like that to get them some economical stuff. And we also purchase farm shares, CSA shares, from like Dream of Wild Health and some of the other local farms, Weight House. We just put it on the lobby and let people take it. And so that's another way that we are resolving some of those things. So yeah. I can't remember what your other questions were.
The other piece of that was encouraging foods for immunity. And I think that I'm talking about that with the specificity of coming out of a pandemic. And if you've, done any work in encouraging immunity, or like recommending foods that do, or especially like for our relatives who are coming out of maybe chemotherapy and are in remission. And so just kind of encouraging overall wellness.
Yeah, nothing too earth shattering. Most cases, the most nutrient dense foods are going to be the freshest stuff. If we, sometimes if we cook stuff for a really long time, it's kind of a tricky one if somebody is in treatment, because they talk about, if you're getting treatments, make sure your stuff is cooked. You want to make sure there's no potential for foodborne illnesses and things like that. But at the same time, we know that if we really highly process or cook for really, 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 really long time, sometimes we lose some of those little bit more delicate like vitamins and minerals, especially some of those water soluble ones, that can have some protective properties. And so I would say it's going to depend on the individual where they are with their treatment. Are they still actively going through it? Are they now complete with it? What's their weight status? That's the other really big one from a dietitian perspective. A lot of times, and for good reason, that is actually the priority. What is your weight status? If you're going through treatment, or if you're done going through treatment, did you lose a bunch of weight? If so, that is usually where we start. And then we actually talk about, which you wouldn't think we would talk about as a dietitian, really high calorie, nutrient dense stuff to help them replenish some of that weight, because that is one of the biggest indicators for success with treatment and just outcomes, is maintaining a healthy weight. So that oftentimes is actually a big focus when it comes to oncology, nutrition, and things like that, is actually making sure people aren't depleting. In particular, it comes down to that muscle mass. We really want to make sure that we're keeping that muscle mass where it belongs in the muscle tissue, and it's not, they're not losing a bunch of that tissue through, poor appetite, and things like that is usually the case that we tend to see. And so it really just depends. It individual. That's where it is really nice if people are well connected with their cancer care. They're probably going to be meeting one-on-one with a dietitian that's going to have a specialized sort of plan for them, and and with that, still trying to make sure they're getting enough protein in their diets. It's going to help support immunity. And then also, as much as able, fresh produce. The only downside with that, like I said, is they do tend to be lower calorie things. And so maybe it means adding to it. So if, somebody is really struggling to keep weight on, they've lost a lot of weight, fresh produce is great, but maybe we need to add some butter or peanut butter or something like that to it, so that way they're still getting their calorie needs and things like that. So yeah.
Thank you. I was like really excited to have you answer some of those more technical questions of where like you see the world of like someone coming out of chemotherapy or working one-on-one with those types of clients. And so thank you for sharing that, and your perspective is really valuable in this conversation as we're celebrating our relatives who are coming out of and celebrating them coming out of their fight with cancer. And so oh man, I forgot what order. We can go to Piet next. So again, the question is, how do we encourage our people to eat healthily when it is difficult to do so, given the context of the pandemic and accessibility?
So one thing that I have been working on and soon to present to everyone, the world, I guess, is just introducing like really fun ways to engage not only adults, but children and families into learning how to do so with cooking classes. So I do online cooking classes, and I know during the pandemic, a lot of people were learning how to cook for the first time in their entire lives. And you have like, I've taught, like there's this one girl specifically, I taught her, she's in her early to mid 20s, and she had never like cooked anything before, because she went from like a home that people were cooking for her to college where they had like food provided and cooked for them. And then she's like, the only thing I really know how to make is like canned soup or like ramen or whatever college food we were all eating at some point in our lives. And so I was teaching her the very basics of like how to like sear and chop and like properly hold a knife without cutting your fingers off and things of that nature. And so I feel like a lot of people like are more prone to invest their time into learning how to do something like this when it's fun. So one way that I'm trying to encourage people, and Indigenous people, Native people, anybody, is by teaching and making it really fun and teaching them like really simple, easy recipes that are nutrient dense and using ingredients that they have readily like available to them. Like any store across the entire state, like the entire country, has access to a can of tuna, right? And then you have access to like one or two sorts of vegetables that you can like mix in with this can of tuna, maybe make a tuna patty or like, and like make like a nice sauce. And so I'm always trying to teach people very basic recipes with basic, I wouldn't say basic recipes, but like nutrient dense, fun recipes with very basic ingredients. And so that's one way that I'm teaching people coming out of the pandemic, and I was teaching people during the pandemic. And then one ingredient that I can always like tell people is like it should be a staple is a broth of some sort. Like you can use broth for so many things, whether it be like adding it to a sauce or making a soup. And especially for people that have, been struggling with their health from, maybe losing a lot of weight from chemo treatment or having loss of appetite, is drinking broth. It has amazing health benefit, nutrient dense. It helps with weight management when you've lost a ton of weight after receiving these treatments. And so broth is always something that I always tell people you should have in your refrigerator at all times. I use broth like all the time for different things. And even if it's like, I'm not feeling well, I'm like, feeling a little nauseous, but I know I should eat something, even though I don't want to eat something, like, you just heat up some broth and you drink it, and it has so many benefits to it. So broth is something that I think is like it should be a staple in everyone's homes, and it's really affordable. You know, you can buy broth from the store. Comes in like little cartons, like in the soup section or something, and you can even buy really fancy ones at the other fancy places that are around. Like I live in California, so I have access to everything. I know not everybody has access to those things, but I feel like broth is one thing that you do have access to. But that's more so like, you know, people that are not feeling well, coming off of, you know, feeling sick and that nature, but just trying to like promote people to take, you know, to eat healthier is like teaching them cooking lessons. I love teaching people. So yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up for me.
Finding a teacher and buying some broth. I like am gonna have to like buy some broth now and keep it in my pantry. Writing
And
that down.
actually, since we are on the topic, before I finish saying what I was going to say, I'm actually making, so I have like this series of cooking lessons coming out very soon. They were supposed to be available this month, but I'm tweaking some recipes still. So maybe starting next month, I have what is Indigenous fusion food, which is some of the food that I've been serving my clients. And I've been like doing some recipe development. And so I'm going to be teaching some of these recipes during like, you know, doing like an online Zoom class. And they're actually going to be free for all Native tribal members. So this is like free, and you can like do this with your family and like your kids, and like whoever wants to do this can do it. If you're a tribal member, they do it for free, and anyone that's not tribal members, they can obviously pay a small fee. But I feel like this is just such an easy, accessible way for people to be able to like, you know, is broaden their spectrum of like what the possibilities are and what they can do with their families and do within their home, and like with ingredients that they have accessible to them. So just wanted to like put that in there.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I'll make sure to like all of the contact information of all of our panelists will be available at the end. And also, I'm sure ACAF could facilitate in providing that information to any of our attendees who want it. So your cooking classes, because finding a teacher might be hard, but Piet just made herself available. So
Sure.
bam. And so Crystal, to you, oh, really quick, feel free to drop any questions that you have for any of our panelists in the chat. I already see a couple. So I want to leave at least a good 15, or no, I'll probably, maybe this will be our last like question that I have written out, and then we'll address the chat questions. Panelists, can you see the questions in the chat? Because then you can kind of start thinking about answering them, and I'll read them off near the end here of our discussion. But Crystal, to you, how do we encourage our people to eat healthily when it's difficult to do so? And yeah, with the pandemic and accessibility.
Wow, that is a question that probably everybody asks. Um, how do we do that? Well, just me listening to Mariah as she was talking. She had a lot of good points just for her just being a nutritionist. But what I do is how I introduce foods. You know, of course, I'm an indigenous chef, so I make a lot of indigenous foods, and I always get, oh, I never had that before. Oh, okay, you know. But at the same time, as Piet was talking, we've been doing a lot of Zoom during COVID and a lot of food demos, and so I get a lot of people that reply right after, or they'll email me saying, you know, can I, you know, about this recipe, that recipe. But it always, just like what Mariah said, it's baby steps. Definitely. If they're not used to it, eating these kind of foods, definitely a baby step. And so how I introduce healthy, for instance, like I always prefer to go to a farmer's market, shop in season. You can get the best things. And sometimes I even take people to the farmer's markets and show them, because sometimes some people are visual people, you know, you can give recipes all you want. But it depends who you are feeding and who you are having people to access these healthy foods into their diets, especially like I said, I'm in the urban area. I always say, hey, guess what? I got this right here at a farmer's market. Guess how much I got it for? Because when people think, oh, how am I gonna get this? How am I gonna get that? It's about having accessibility and having the access. Where are they gonna get it? But also at the same time, just incorporating healthy foods into their meal. Everything that Mariah said, I totally agree. I totally agree. And she had really awesome points of that. For instance, tea. You know, that is something that's very inexpensive, something that's easy we can grow. For mint tea, we'll start off with mint. Okay, you don't have to have these sugary sodas. You don't have to have this. Start boiling the little mint. You know, if you don't like that just bland flavor, throw, it depends. Throw a little bit of maple in there. You know, start little baby steps. But like for me, like I like mint. I like mint. I like having like that, but a lot of people don't. Just start off really small, and that's just removing something and adding something, and then it kind of go from there. So that's what I do. And when people ask me different questions, I think it's fun. I mean, everybody to each his own. I think it's so fun going to a farmer's market. And I love it's a challenge. You can challenge yourself. Challenge yourself going to a farmer's market, seeing what's in season, carry about $5, $6, see what you come home with. That's a good challenge right there. And I like a good challenge. And so that's something, people are like, guess what I found? Guess what I got? Even up to, well, you can get lettuce or what's in season right now, or just like what Mariah said is rhubarb, which I love. It's right now, it's so very inexpensive, but if you get it like during the holidays or something, don't even bother, you know? Um, but that's a good way to introduce healthy foods, of just baby steps, even if it's well, let's say somebody, like I had a conversation, somebody didn't like onions, they don't like fresh onions. Well, for instance, what is the health benefits of fresh onions, between the cooking onions? If people knew more about the health benefits of it, I think they would consume it more. And a lot has to do in how you go to the grocery store and how they show everything on the eye level, and it's that's I'm just going by what I do personally and what I give people. Um, Tell them, just kind of start with baby steps. Everything is a baby steps. We all have to crawl before we walk, and it's the same thing with the food. I was raised and with commodities. I was raised where my family made fry bread 5 days a week and biscuit and gravy. Yes, all those things are great, but the reality is, how about we can celebrate those things maybe on your birthday, anniversary? You don't have to have it every day. You just that's how I that's my experience. And and me, I don't eat it. If there's a certain person, or it's like you just eat healthy. The more healthy you eat, the more you introduce yourself. But then again, how much money do you have? That's the reality of going, especially during COVID. um, right now we're in season of everything is so blooming right now, and good harvesting, for instance. I love to get ready for harvesting. That's my favorite. Look at Elena, look at her cabinet right behind her. That's harvesting right there. So that's me. I hope somebody can take something away from this.
No, when you mentioned tea, I was literally brought back to how my sister is a massive tea drinker. And I wouldn't say I was like ever really into that, but it was literally seeing her model it constantly, like almost ritualistically going to bed and everything. And even when I kind of talked to her about, wanting to try it, she said, well, you know what? If you don't like the strong taste of tea, let's start with mint. That's what she told me. And then she's like, and even if you don't like that, we can splash like a little bit of like some type of milk in there, to like lessen it or make it more like what you're used to. And then sure enough, now like tea is something that I very much enjoy. And so, I mean, that was a baby step for sure. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and it's like important to model, like Piet's been mentioned before. I mean, it starts in families, and it starts in, I mean, whatever your family looks like. Um, and so, sorry.
Oh no, no, exactly. Like for instance, I do the Indigenous Red Market, and we only do a selective powwows a year, and what I notice is all these sugary drinks. Horror. I mean, it was just, So I start doing Indigenous teas, and I've been doing it now for over 8 years, and just to the native public, just show them just different teas, and so now people, they come up and they say they love teas, and it's so easy to make, and it's inexpensive. Like, we're in blueberries, get some blueberries, just boil little blueberries, you can have fun.
That's good. I love it.
Mm.
Elena, to you. The question being, how do we encourage people to eat healthily when it is difficult to do so?
I think part of it is taking away the intimidation factor or the inaccessibility of some of these things. And really, is in anything when we're teaching each other, it's leading by example. It's saying, I know that this is hard, but I'm trying to do it. And I think together we can do it. You know, it's making small changes to palates that are not as familiar with those flavors or the ingredients, and saying, if you try it, that's a win. Nobody's going to like everything, and I don't expect them to, but trying it, getting it into your home, using those ingredients. If it means substituting blue corn for flour in your gravy, then do it. That corn is there then. And the more you do it, the more you want it, and the more your body wants it. And the more that you're implanting those sensical memories of, say, having corn mush in the morning with berries, we started doing that once a month, and now my kids do it 3 times a week. They prefer it over cold cereal, like sugary cereal. It's making those small changes. I mean, we've said it that sometimes life is hard and you struggle with your food source, and it really isn't a food desert, because deserts are very plentiful. And I've had that conversation with some incredible ethnobotanists about, it's a food junkyard that we live in. So how do we approach it differently and really say that it is accessible and it doesn't need to be intimidating, and I will teach you if you want to learn, like what Piet was saying. We are able to teach you because we are always learning. Those spaces are, I'm always excited. I mean, look, Crystal and I just went to Alaska to learn, and to share, and to be like, wow. I mean, mind-blowing experiences when it comes to food, and really how that food nourishes us, and the way we value it, instead of, this mindless junkyard of food that we've had to deal with. During COVID, there was a lot of emergency programs that came out, and I think because they were being distributed by USDA or these other, very high profile sources, we ended up accepting them. Our tribe had massive food distributions, and there was chicken nuggets and sugary yogurt. And, how do we stop that, but still provide the support we need to provide, and say that we can shift this? Like, yes, yogurt, incredible for you if you have the right kind. If it's not, no live cultures, then it's not yogurt in my mind. Like, so how do we say that in a relatable way you can make these small changes? And nobody's saying like today you have to be decolonized. It's saying be more aware that it isn't, before we can reach food sovereignty, we have to get food security, and that if you are hungry, you cannot be healthy. So how do we provide for each other in a way, if it's sharing that knowledge, if it's saying that this bite, it might be a little intimidating, but you're going to like it. At least try it, and having those initial steps happening. I saw in the comments about chaga, and I haven't really said it. I have some people dear to me right now that are going through treatments. And I actually had talked to a couple of my ethnobotanist friends about what are some ways that I can help support them, not only to give them something that will nourish them or make them feel a little bit better through this trying time, but just to say that I see you, you know, and I'm here, and there's prayers here. And chaga was one of those things. And I'm glad that it was put in the chat, because it helps draw the toxins out, and it's natural. Like, it feeds the trees, which to me are like this incredible presence. You know, I'm a woodland, you know, I'm a woodland Indian. That's what I grew up calling myself. So I don't feel like it's politically offensive for me. But I'm from the woods, and the trees have incredible medicine, and the enzymes, and, you know, they purify things, and they give you this incredible life water, and we turn it into syrup and sugar, and, you know, we drink it straight from the trees. And really seeing that there's a fungus that has this extra, you know, this growth from these trees, it's, how can that not be medicine? You know, I mean, there's definitely things that you need to know before you go out and start harvesting stuff like fungus in the woods. But when you start learning those, you start appreciating the beauty of what the creator gave us. And it's really going back to that basic thing that, you know, people say, and it is a trendy thing now, food is medicine. And I always tell them, you can't duplicate that. You know, for me, the medicine is in the process. I heal every time I cook a meal for my community. Every time I have those conversations with people that grow or source or harvest for our community, for each other. And you know that when you eat those foods, it shouldn't be intimidating. It should be welcoming, and it should be filled with prayer and intention, and know that these ingredients, you know, they're fulfilling their destiny by nourishing you in a way that only they can, and appreciating that in every bite. And I think that, you know, when we start rewriting the narrative and really looking at our food systems a little bit differently, we can change the way that we heal each other. And I'm not going to pretend that I know what it is to have to go through some of the things that, you know, our community members have to go through, or the strength that it takes, but I can say that I'm here and I can support, you know.
Thank you so much for just like the tenderness of that story. And I hope to the person who asked the question, was it talking about chaga, that helped. And I would love to also address the second question that was asked in the chat, and I'll kind of paraphrase it since we're recording here. So after enduring leukemia and a bone marrow transplant, one woman's son is constantly changing tastes, and it's very challenging to keep him adequately nourished. A lot of fish is in the diet, but do you have any other suggestions for nourishment? So anyone can share. This is probably the last question, or I mean, yeah, we'll narrow this down to the last question before we end the webinar.
I'd like to say something about that. You know, like I said, I can't pretend to imagine what that has to be like, going through that. But there is so much out there, and so many flavors out there, and so many different ways that I think everybody has kind of said, you know, seasonally, even spatially, where you grow or what you have available. Even just a bite, if there's something that he prefers at that moment, you know, if there's a way to have it accessible, then try and provide that as much as possible. And I think that, you know, I have had people in my community that I know have suffered some of the same issues, and because it changes all the time, it also becomes this beautiful way of strengthening, you know, like sometimes your taste changes because of what you need, and your body is telling you, I need this now. And listening to that and being able to provide that for him, then then he is actually really telling you that, you know, maybe that isn't going to nourish me the way I need it to, and I don't want it anymore, but I want this, and then I want that. And sometimes it is not having the flavor, but having the nutrients, or like Piet said, broth. You know, you can do so much with that base of nutrition that you would be able to change that. And I really think that listening to what your body is saying has a lot to do with that, and a lot. I mean, your body lets you know, and so sometimes it's just respecting that somebody is telling you that they need a little bit more in different ways.
Any of the other, anyone else like to share that?
I think I can just piggyback off of what she just mentioned. And as soon as you read the question, I thought about the same thing. It kind of boils down to like what that person's body is needing at that moment. And it's kind of like, oh, I have a craving for these things. So it's like, oh, your body's actually needing this certain type of nourishment. So I don't know if this is like a good suggestion to make, but my aunt, when she was going through her chemotherapy treatments, she had the same thing where she was going, and I spent a lot of time with her in the hospital, and I went through the whole process with her changing from day to day to day, and like each chapter of that journey. And she had the same thing where she wanted to eat this thing this day, and then she didn't have an appetite, and then she wanted to eat specifically, like the most specific thing you can actually ever imagine is like the black beans from that Mexican street or Mexican restaurant down the street. Like, I really want those beans. And so we would go out and we would get those beans for her. And it's like whatever her body was like wanting or needing, and that's what she was craving. And so the only recommendation I can have is, like Elena was saying, is just trying to make that as accessible to them as possible. And because once they're needing that, you want to continue to get them to eat that food, because 85% of the time they don't have an appetite, and whatever food is being given to them at the point, like they don't want to eat it. And the only thing that they're putting down into their body is Ensure, which is like a nutrient dense milkshake of some sort. And that's just like, that's not enough for them. So if they want something, get it for them. Try to find other ways that you can, get that same ingredient or that same thing into another type of food for them. So, and even if you do research of like, okay, what nutrient is most, what is this food representing? Like, what are the nutrient benefits of this food? And try to find other foods that are similar to it that maybe like once they eat it, like, oh yeah, I do want to eat this as well. Just kind of having the alternative for them. So it's just they're not eating the same thing over and over. But yeah, it's a very like interesting stage to go through with family members when they don't want to eat. And then when they do want to eat, it's something so specific and like doesn't really make sense. But you have to like do what you possibly can to get them to like nourish themselves as much as possible.
And on that note, if anyone else wants to share, I want to quickly read some of the comments that came up during the discussion. So I'm loving this discussion. I love hearing all of your passion and dedication to our communities. And thank you. And then on Facebook, some of our viewers have said, thank you for doing this for us and sharing. I appreciate this very much. And we have more thank yous happening. I put the panelists' emails and contact information in the chat for Zoom viewers. And then I'm going to quickly share my screen so that way anyone on Facebook can also view contact information. So, and I guess one way we can end this all is to any of our relatives who are celebrating life this month. If there's anything you would like to say to them, panelists, before we go, a blessing, a prayer, an encouragement, I think that would be a great way to kind of end this panel and to sign off. If anyone wants to share that.
I guess I will say something. I want to give a thanks to the other panelists that took their time to like have this conversation. As someone that is fairly new to kind of dipping my toes into food sovereignty and opening the discussion for people like myself that are, looking to reconnect to, my culture through food and just spread the knowledge as much as I possibly can. I just want to thank you too and Mariah as well for all the work that you guys have done, in your lifetimes to try to, pass this knowledge on to other people and have resources available for people like myself and other people out there to learn from. And so I just want to give you guys a big thanks. And I'm so honored to be a part of this conversation with you and be able to connect with you all. And I really hope to continue to stay connected and learn from you all and be able to have you guys be a huge part of, my learning as an Indigenous woman, as a chef, as an Indigenous chef, because like I mentioned before, this is kind of like the journey that I've decided to take on as, a chef and for my career to really be focused on Indigenous food. And I think that it's super important for us to be able to come together and be unified and really like kind of take our quote unquote power back and be representation of our culture. And that's something that I'm super, super passionate about. And so thank you, Catherine, for facilitating this and for the American Indian Cancer Foundation for facilitating this. This has been also something that I'm learning from as well. And so I'm so appreciative of this opportunity. So I just wanted to say that before we signed off for today.
Beautiful. I just want to again thank anyone who viewed this on our Facebook page, and then also our attendees who are here on this Zoom. With that being said, if there's nothing left to share, Elena, do you want to?
I did want to say one thing. I mean, thank you for having us here, but in speaking to those who are survivors, like your courage is seen and felt, and just know that you're never alone. There's a lot of strength and resilience, which are words that are used a lot, but very much appropriately used when it comes to survivors. And that is part of your blood, and we are all connected and we are all here. And I love hearing about, people who are able to overcome that. And so I just would want to say, like, your courage is seen and felt, and we are all here for you. So, in whatever way it is, if it's like we can provide a meal or, a conversation that helps you feel connected, then, I'm grateful to be part of that journey. So thank you for providing us with this opportunity.
I think that is the perfect way to end this conversation. And I would just like to, again, just a thank you to everyone who's come. And any further questions, you can find my information is in the chat box, and then also our website at americanindiancancer.org is a great resource as well to reach out. And with that, I will say good night. We'll stop screen sharing and stop recording. Thank you so much again. And I hope you all have a good rest of your week, that you stay safe, that you stay well, and that you stay connected and you are loved. All right. Have a good rest of your night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.